Sarvebhyah Swagatam to this webinar on the basics of Vishishta Vedanta. We have been studying this text called as Vedanta Karikavali. As the slide says, it's a primer on Vishishta Vedanta. In today's session, we will try to complete the Jiva Nirupana, the chapter on Jiva Nirupana, the chapter on Jiva, and we'll begin with the chapter on Isvara. Invocatory prayers first. Shriman Venkatanatharya Kavitar Kikesari Vedantacharya Vadyome Sannidhattam Sadahridi Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmala Spatikakrutim Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Hayagrivamupaasmahe Yonityamachyutapadam Bhujayugma Rukma Vyamo Hatastathitarani Trinaya Mene Asmadgurur Bhagavatos Dayeka Sindhoho Ramanuja Sajarano Sharanam Prapadye श्रीमद्रमाधवोपज्ञां नत्वाचार्य परंपरां पूर्वे लक्ष्मण सिद्धांत कारिकां कारिकावलीं. This was the last slide that we saw in the previous session. सत्संगातिथि सुश्लोक द्वयोक्त गतिमान नरः आविर्भूत स्वस्वरूपो मुक्तो ब्रह्मानुभूति भाग. The Karikavali author refers to two verses from a Pramana Grantha, and then according to that he says how a Jivatma leaves his body at the time of liberation. That is, she leaves the final Sharira, Sula Sharira, after which there is no birth for him, and how he goes, reaches Sri Vaikuntha, which is the Mukta Sthana, according to Vishishta Vedanta. He travels through different worlds. All these are explained in the Shastras. These are not a fit of imagination as some authors have claimed in their textbooks, stating they have taken a so to say a dig on Ramanuja, saying as if Ramanuja has traveled all the way and all those things, but these are not they should not be taken they should not have been written in the right spirit. I mean, that's not the right spirit. These are all mentioned in some pramana, okay, and these are not imaginary stories. Things are described as to how the Jivatma leaves the final Sharira through the Murdhanya Nadi, and then there are the paths of sun, moon, etc. etc. So ultimately he reaches Sri Vaikuntha. Okay, so this we saw in the last class. Now we will go through the commentary, the last few lines. Atravirbhuta padene jivasya mukto nabhuta purvam swarupam utpadyate. Now, okay, I think I can read the line before that also. Anena margena gachan naraha swayam prakasharupam swaswarupam prapya brahma anubhavan bhavati ityartah. Right now, the actual swarupa of all of us, the jivatmas, it is not manifesting, or it does not manifested. Why? Because there is so much of mala outside in the system, in the around the atma. So the atma has not manifested to us yet. It can rather manifest in its fullest capacity only during liberation. That's the point here. While doing jnana yoga, etc., there is a chance that the atma is able to see itself, but even that would be only a glimpse of it, not the complete swarupa. So here, in its while reaching Sri Vaikuntha, the swarupa of the atma manifests, and having attained or having let us say returned to its original swarupa, it experiences Brahman bliss. Atra avirbhutapadena jivasya mukto nabhutapurvam na abhutapurvam swarupam utpadyate. Here avirbhutapadena, with the word avirbhuta, we have to understand that during mukti, mukto means during mukti, the swarupa which did not manifest before has manifested. Kintu swabhavikamapi madhye karmana tirohitam swarupam avirbhavati. But this is not something which has come afresh. This is already there, but due to karma, madhye, even though it is swabhavika, madhye karmana tirohitam. Because of karma, because of the mala, which is dirt, impurity, which is accumulated because of karma, it was tirohitam, it was covered up. Tadaha Shrutihi Param Jyoti Upasampadya Svena Rupena Abhinishpadyate. Param Jyotihi Upasampadya. Having attained that state of liberation, Svena Rupena, the Jivatma manifests or shines in his with his own form. Sutrakaraschaha Sampadyavirbhava Svena Shabdhate. Shabdhate means from scriptures. Sutrakara in Brahma Sutra, he also states that Sampadya Avirbhavaha Svena Shabdhate. Having attained liberation, the Jivatma, the Atma Swarupa manifests. Svena. Now this Karika gives us a picture as to what after liberation. After getting liberated, can a Jivatma play God? Can he tell in a lighter vein, can we say, if the Jivatma can tell Brahman that you can please take rest for some time, let me handle the world affairs. Can he say something like this? It is not possible. That's what the Sutra also says, the Brahma Sutra. Here the Karikavali author says, Muktasya bhogamatre tu samyam shrutishu choditam swechaya sarvalokeshu sancharosya narudhyate. Bhogamatre samyam. The fact is that Brahman, it remains in its own experience. That is, Brahman experiences itself, and the Jivatma will also experience Brahman. In that experience, there is no difference. Though the Jivatma is a very subtle entity, Paramatma or Brahman is Vibhu. With the strength of Shruti, it has been stated that in the nature of experience, there is equality between the Jivatmas and Brahman, but only in the liberated state. How can Brahman experience itself? Now, these are all abstract concepts, but our acharyas have tried to give us some idea of what it is through the Puranas and Itihasas. Like we all have heard about this Balakrishna who is sleeping on a leaf, in the Pralaya Jala, and tasting his tasting his toe basically. That's what we're talking about, Brahman enjoying itself. So we do see children, infants, what they do, they rejoicing on their own by themselves. So that is Brahman is experiencing itself, and Jivatmas, the Mukta Jivas also, they experience Brahman bliss. And what does the Jivatma gain now? He experiences Brahman, and technically he becomes fit. He gets the ability to roam wherever he wants to. Now this is a theoretical proposition or a hypothetical proposition to say that he gets the ability. It is not that he will roam about, because the point is that after having gone there, he will rejoice in Brahman bliss. But the emphasis is to say that he also gets the ability to roam wherever he wants to, but even that will be in accordance with the will of Brahman. Let us go through the commentary. Muktau Brahmana saha abhedam jivasya kechit achakshate. Some people say that there is abheda between Jiva and Brahman in Mukti. This has to be mentioned here. The concept of Vishistadvaita can be fully explained only when it is placed in contrast with Advaita. That's the sthiti. Because rightly or wrongly, Vedanta means Advaita to many of us, and Advaita theory is more popular, because I got some slogans like Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, like this. I remember when I was doing my I think PhD, there was a student, an older lady who was a Advaita by Advaitini, we can say by conviction. So one day she called me up and said, in our Advaita, we have a slogan like this. Do you have something like this in Vishuddha Veda? Like one slogan, like how you have the this in advertisements, have the one-liner. Do you have such a kind of one-liner? With some pride, she was asking me. Then I told her, the moment you say your Advaita or our Advaita, the philosophy of Advaita is gone. No, because in Advaita there is no sambandha at all. But unfortunately, what happens is when we believe or when we belong to some school of Vedanta, there is so much of attachment to it that we tend to criticize or engage in arguments with others without complete understanding. So that should not be the case. The spirit has to be academic. We have to appreciate the commentaries, how the acharyas have tried to reconcile the problems of existence, and how they've advocated the way to moksha, etc. So at this level, we should not be engaging such things, and there is in fact no need to feel very proud about it, because every acharya is great and they have done all the efforts to propound the philosophy. And just because we are born in some philosophy, or just because we believe in that philosophy, we cannot take any pride in that. Just for to say that, also to mention that uh, unless we place the Advaita proposition or position and then explain the Vishuddha Advaita, it will be difficult to explain why these words are being used. So here the Karika, the commentary, the comment, Vyakhyanakarta, what he says is that some people say that there is abheda between Brahman and Jiva, but we don't accept. Tan nirasartam tatra tasya avasthayamaha muktasya iti. That's why the Karikavali author says muktasya. Muktasya means to the person who has got to the Jivatma who has got liberated. Bhogamatre tu samyam. The samyam or equality is only in experience. Niranjanaha paramam samyam upaiti. There is a Shruti Vakya to this effect. Ityadi Shrutishu Muktasya Ishwaranasaha Paramasamyam Uchyate. So these kind of Shruti statements very clearly say the similarity between, not oneness, the similarity between Jivatma and Paramatma in the Brahman bliss Anubhava. Tacha Samyam Bheda Garbhamiti na Abheda Varnam Yuktam. किंतु भगवत स्वरूप रूप गुणाध्यनुभवे भगवता सह अत्यंत साम्य मुक्तस्य. What it means is that the samya is in the experience. There is beda, of course. The jivatma is different, Brahman is different, but there is abheda only in the Brahma anubhava, or in the way Brahman is being experienced. Yada Shruti Soshrudaya Sarvan Kaman Saha Brahmana Vipaschiteti. This is Taittiriya Upanishad. Atra Brahmana Saheti Sahayogi Tatiya. In this Shruti statement, the word Saha is there. Saha has to be read with Brahman. Brahmana Saha. Along with Brahman. Na Prakrityaditvat Abhede Ananvayat. It cannot be taken with Prakriti or something else. It has to be taken only with Brahman. Sutrakaropi Bhogamata Samyalingacha. So this is a very Spashtataya Uktam Sutra Brahma Sutre. Bhogamatra Samya Lingacha. The Samya is only in Bhoga. Bhogamatra Samya Lingacha. If again I repeat this statement of mine, when one does an impassionate study of the Brahma Sutras, the Sutrakara tends to be more of a Vishtadvedan, if I can put it politically, than this thing, because in many places he very clearly brings out the differences between Jivatma and Brahman. Why I'm saying this is that because my thesis is also based on the study, a comparative study of the three schools of Vedanta, the nature and destiny of the Jivatma according to the Brahma Sutras. This is the thesis. When the study was undertaken, there is so much evidence within the sutras that the Sutrakara has proposed Bheda more. Of course, there are references for Abheda, but then they have to be, it looks like they have to be reconciled with the major theme. Okay, and that's the principle of the Upanishads also. The Upanishads also, they have different statements mentioning, some mention Bheda, some mention Abheda, and some tend to unify the gap. But we have to go with the major theme. And asya muktasya svechaya sarveshu lokeshu kamacharo bhavati. And the Shruti, because Shruti says he becomes kamachara. Kamachara means not the kama has not to be understood in the with the negative connotation that we normally used to. This is on his own. That is, he can go anywhere. He can move about anywhere. Tatrana kopi pratibandha. There is no nothing can stop him basically. तथा च श्रूयते सर्वेषु लोकेषु कामचारो भवति इमान् लोकान् कामानि कामरूपेण संचरन्. These are statements from the Shruti. The emphasis here, what we have to understand is that he is freed of his karma. He does not need a sharira to move about, and he is not confined to anything, karma, etc. Therefore, he becomes free. Now, just to appreciate or give us an idea about what the freedom could be, the Shruti tries to say that he can go anywhere if he wishes. But who will leave the Brahma Anubhava and go elsewhere? And where can one go beyond Brahman? Because there is nothing beyond Brahman at all. Therefore, these are to be taken, to be understood in that perspective, and not literally. And then, thinking the Jivatma will be roaming around, just like how we saw Narada Maharishi, he'll be roaming around. But if that is needed, he can go. That's the point here. Strength of the Shruti. स्वेच्छा च हरिसंकल्पायत्ता मुक्तस्य लभ्यते अनावर्त शास्त्रं तु कर्मावर्त निषेधकृत्. Now, swecha means on his own will. Now, is not the Jivatma under the overall control of Paramatman? Can there be a swecha? Can there be his own will? If somebody asks like this, then his will be in accordance with the will of Brahman. That is the answer. There will be the two wills will be reconciled. There will not be a Veda there, and even that his will also be under the overall sankalpa of Bhagavan. And Anavartana Shastram. Now, if you say he roams about everywhere, will he not come into contact with Prakriti again? Will he not be confined by Prakriti? No, because the Shruti very clearly says Anavartihi. That is, he will not come back. Then, on the one hand, you say he will not come back. On the other hand, you say he will come back. He can come back on his own. Now, the coming back is not due to karma. That is the point here. Karma varta nishedhakrit. The avartha means coming again to samsara. That is not due to karma. Nanu, I am reading the commentary here. Nanu bhagavat paratantrika surupasya muktasya katam swechaya sanchara idyatraha. The very basic swarupa of Jivatma is bhagavat paratantriya. He is a paratantra to Bhagavan. Then how can he roam about on his own will? Then ityatraha swecha chaiti ayam muktaha. Just checking on the questions. Ayam muktaha swechaya sancharatam iti bhagavataha sankalpaha. Now the sankalpa of Bhagavan is in such a manner that let this mukta roam about wherever he wants to. Tam anuruddhya pravartamanasya asya na bhagavat paratantre hanihi. Now anuruddhya means following his sankalpa. The Jivatma roams about, so therefore there is no loss to the Bhagavat Paratantriya. Tatha cha asya swechacharopi Bhagavat adhina iti tadhatinyam nya vyahanyati iti bhavaha. Therefore his existence and his sanchara are all or both are in accordance with Bhagavat Sankalpa. And tarihi yadi muktaha swechaya prakriti loke sancharati. Now this is a Purvapaksha, Nanu. If he comes back to the Prakriti Mandala, tasya Paramapadat Avartireva Palati, then it becomes clear that he leaves Paramapada and comes to Prakriti Mandala. Muktasya Paramapatasya imam manavam avartam navartante brahmalokam abhisampadya nacha paravatate nacha paravatate ityadi shrutibihi anavritya shabdhat ityadi smritibhischa nishidhyate. But Shruti and Smriti very clearly state that he will not come back. Then how do you say he becomes a kamachara? Katham ityatraha anavartana iti. And avriti nishedha sarvopi karma nibandhana avriti nishedha paraha. Now this avriti or coming back is confined to karma. That is, he since he is not confined by karma, there is no problem if he comes back to or if he roams about in the Prakriti Mandala also, if needed. If he roams, then he roams freely without the confinement of karma. That's what the Shruti means. Natu sarva karma vinirmuktasya swecha nimitta vritti nisheda para iti bhavaha. Therefore, sarva karma vinirmuktaha is freed of all kinds of karma. Only that is being here mentioned here. There will be no confinement to karma, no again clinging on to karma. but nothing stops him from roaming about on his own will. This is the meaning here. And finally, the last slide for Jiva Nirupana. Nitya Sankuchita Jnana Nityam Bhagavadagya Tat Kankari Radha Nitya Ananta Gurudadayaha. Now, this is these two Karikas are devoted to explain the concept of Nitya Jivas. Vishishtadvaita accepts a class of Jivas called as Nitya Suris based on the Shruti again. Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. Some Shrutis they mentioned that some Jivatmas they experience Brahman always in the past, present, and future. Now, if you take always, if you have to account for the past, then you can't. You have to also take into account the existence of Jivatmas who were never in bondage. So those are termed as Nitya Suris, and it is also the Sankalpa of Bhagavan. There is an Acharya called as Kurataivan who was a disciple of Ramanuja. Kurataivan and his famous son Parashara Bhatta both were so to say genius, brilliant in their own way. Kuratan, these both in fact they have answered many of the queries that one might have in the form of verses addressed to the addressed to Paramatma, expressing the bhakti. So how can some be nitya jiva, some how can some be bonded, some things anitya and some things nitya? Then Kuratavan says it is because of the sankalpa of Bhagavan in such a way that let these things be nitya and let these things be anitya. In that way, he is trying to answer those doubts if at all one has them. In the same way, nitya asankuchita jnana. The jnana of the nitya suris is asankuchita, is never contracted. They were the very reason for being in bondage is because of the sankocha of jnana. So the nitya suris we never had that sankocha or contraction in their knowledge. Just a second. Now, and they in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya or Vishishtadvaita philosophy, the moksha dasha is explained in this manner. The Jivatmas they perform Kainkarya to Bhagavan because he has a Rupa. Paramatma or Brahman has a Divya Mangala Vigraha. Besides Swarupa, he also has a Vigraha or Divya Mangala Vigraha, so to say, to which Kainkarya is being performed by the Nitya Suris and Mukta Atmas. So that's why he says the Karikavali says that Kainkarata Nityaha Ananta Garudadayaha. A few Nitya Suris are named here, Ananta, Garuda, etc. It's all. Svechavatirnan Kanschit Nidarshayishyan Pratamam Teshan Nityatmamaha Nitya iti. So just by mentioning some names, Ananta, Garuda, et al. Now he says, how come they are called as Nitya? Because the question is that the point is that all Jivatmas are eternal. In fact, Vishishtadvaita proposes that even Prakriti is Nitya. All three are Nitya. Prakriti is Nitya, Jivas are Nitya, and Nityas and Paramatma is Nitya. But then how do you differentiate from Anitya and Nitya? The point is that Prakriti keeps on changing. Prakriti keeps on changing in its Swarupa and Swabhava. Therefore, it's called as Anitya. Even science says the same thing that our body it changes every, let us say, every smallest unit of time. It changes its form. So nobody can. In fact, I say this in a later vein that at no 2 points of time does our height and weight remain the same. I mean, if you constantly keep checking your weight every 5 minutes or whatever, it's bound to change. This is a practical observation. Why? Because there is so much of things happening inside, so many changes happening inside. Then so this is on, but still, or for practical purposes, this is nitya. So that's how Prakriti is called as nitya. And Anitya as well. Anitya in the sense it keeps on changing in its Swarupa and Swabhava constantly. Paramatma on the In contrast to Prakriti, the Paramatma does not change in his Swarupa and Swabhava at all. Therefore, he is the most Nitya, we can say. The Jivatma is caught in between. His Swarupa does not change, but his Swabhava or Dharmabhuta Jnana changes. Therefore, he is both Nitya in his Swarupa and Anitya in his Swabhava. But here, the Nitya Suris are like Brahman or Paramatma, Nitya in both Swarupa and Swabhava in compared to Baddhas and Muktas. Now, this is what the commentator says here. Nityanam Ananta Garuda Vishwaksenadhinam. Ananta Garuda Vishwaksena is one more Nitya Suri. Jnanam Nityam Asankuchita Prasaram Bhavati. Their Jnana, their Dharmabodha Jnana is Nitya, which means Asankuchitam. Sankocha means contraction. Sankuchita means contracted. Asankuchita means never contracted. Asankuchita Prasaram. Always Vibhu. Their Jnana is always Vibhu and it does not contract at any point of time. तथा ते भगवदाज्ञानुसारेण नित्य भगवत कैंकर्यता भवन्ति. In accordance with the Bhagavad Agnya, they become they are always devoted to rendering kainkariya to Bhagavan. Etena tesha nityatva na kevalam swarupena. If this is not only in their swarupa, because if you take only in the swarupa, then swarupa nityatvasya baddha mukta nitya sadhara nityat. Even the baddhas and muktas also have a nitya swarupa. Their swarupa does not change. Therefore, it will be a over applicability or ati vyapti. Therefore, kintu gunataha kreyacha. But the guna and the actions of the baddhas and muktas are not nitya. Whereas even the guna and the kriya of nitya suris are nitya. The guna kriya are all dependent upon dharmabhuta jnana. Baddha mukta yostu guna kriya nitya prasare. For the baddha muktas, the guna kriya are not nitya prasara. Means they are not vibhu. They are not in full expansion. Therefore, the subject to change. Baddha dashayam pratibandhatvat iti bhavaha. Because of pratibandha, their guna and kriya are contracted in baddha dasha. Next, 25th Karika, the final one in Jiva Nirupana. Etesham avataradihi ichchaya eva hareriva adhikarikatam isham amisham adhikarikata amisham ishvaren nirupita. Now, it is believed that the Nitya Suris also take avatars like Brahman. Even that is subject to the Sankalpa of Bhagavan. That's what it is. Etesham avataradihi harehe ichchaya eva iva. Ananta Garudadayas tattad divya suryatmana tattad acharyatmana cha avatirna drishyante. The Itihasa Puranas, they describe some episodes or anecdotes wherein we find Garuda, Ananta are all born and they are into some births and doing some things. I mean, they are caught in some activities and even they become victims of curses. They're being cursed in some, according to some Puranas. How can this happen? Then the Siddhanta says that it's all avatara. Just like how Bhagavan or Brahman or Paramatma does incarnations, he incarnates himself and undergoes or experiences those similar to Jivatmas. Even the Nitya Suris also, they also incarnate and undergo some experiences like normal Jivatmas. And it is believed that some of the Nityasuris have reincarnated as acharyas in the Guru Parampara of Vishtaveda Vedanta. Therefore, tattad acharyatmana cha avatirna drishyante teshu avatareshu bhagavadichcha eva niyamika. So, in their avatars, it is icha. Icha means sankalpa here. Sankalpa of Bhagavan is the guiding factor. Tathachate bhagavadichchanugunanam achar rupena avatirya dharma samsthapanam acharantaha. Now, like just like how Bhagavan he incarnates yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata. In that, in according to that same principle, the Nitya Suris also they incarnate as acharyas for the sake of restoring dharma. Adhikarika vyapadesham kanchit kalam avapya anantaram yathapurvam paramapadam arohanti. So after fulfilling their mottos or principles, they go back to Paramapada. They return to the Paramapada. Yeah, I was about to give a break and we have a question. So you can ask your questions with respect to Jiva Nirupana. I thought there was a hand raised. Any questions? So next is about Paramatma or Ishvara. Any questions? I can take them now on the Jivatma. Hope the audio was clear. You're all able to see the slides also. Okay, I take this silence as a good feedback. We will go to the next Prakarana. Iti Vedanta Karikavalya. Yes, that's a question. Or clear. Okay, thank you. Iti Vedanta Karikavalya Jiva Swarupa Nirupanam Ashtamam Prakaranam. So we have covered the 8th Prakarana. Now we move to the 9th. This is the penultimate. There are only 10 Nirupanas, 10 chapters in this textbook. We are on the 9th chapter right now, which is about Ishvara. There is only one more, which is Adravya Prakarana. Before we go into the Ishvara Prakarana, just I would like to give some few short background about Ishvara. The term Ishvara. It is the order of the day to explain even Vedanta through nice slides, pictures, etc., etc. But I find myself to be on the border of the previous generation and the modern generation, in the sense Vedanta or philosophy is such a thing that we still have to go by Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Not everything can be explained in pictures. Then it becomes a kind of restrictive way of teaching. Of course, pictures are the order of the day, but that's why I don't show many pictures in my presentations, because Vedanta is something which we should have a thirst for it in us. It cannot be forced into us, because only when we have the natural thirst, then we tend to ask questions. First of all, we need to listen. Baudha Shrotavyam, Bahubhyaha Shrotavyam, like this. There are some sayings in Samskrita. So we need to listen to many lectures and from many people, many sources. Then we have to do Chintana by ourselves. It is not like we attend some sessions and then take notes and see all the pictures, and then we don't become Vedantans, we don't become philosophers. Philosophy has to sprout from within, basically. You have to seek answers, and so that's the reason I'm not sharing many pictures. One simple reason is laziness. That's a different thing. But the second and most important reason is what I share now. We need to first of all listen, then digest what we hear. So this concept of Ishvara, there are different terminologies being used by schools of philosophy to name the principle which is understood to be the basis for existence. Brahman is what we find in the Upanishads. Ishvara is also what is found in the Vedas and Upanishads. I mean, in the Vedas. These two are the prominent terminologies, so to say. Of course, Paramatma is another one, as we find in Gita, etc. In Vishishtadvaita, all three refer to only one Tattva. Paramatma, Ishvara, Brahman, these are all same. There is no distinction like in Advaita as to Parabrahman and Aparabrahman or Karya Brahman, etc. etc. Brahman is Brahman. He remains as Brahman in all his states, and he is Ishvara. Ishvara is not an adjunct concept here, it is natural. And when we try to understand Ishvara, is the most subtlest tattva. Therefore, we, or rather the Vedanta or even Nayayika, school of Nyaya, they try to explain the existence of God through his creation. Like the Nyaya school of thought, they try to prove the existence of God with an Anumana. Shityankuradikam Kartajanyam Karyatvat Ghatavat. What they say is that there is an Ishvara. Why? Because just like how we see a pot being made, the entire world is also being made. And just like how a pot has a creator, a potter, the world must also have a creator who cannot be one among us, because a potter's role is very easy, very limited. But to create a big world like this, not any one of us can do this. Therefore, we need a special person called as Ishvara, and that's how they try to prove the existence of God. The reason why they did not resort to Shruti is that one is they were trying to fight with Bauddhas and other people who were outside the Vedic fold. Therefore, to quote a Brahmana which would not be accepted by other schools does not make sense. Therefore, they made their own inferences saying that, let me try to explain Ishvara. Like how Nyaya Kusumanjali author Udayanacharya, he gives many arguments saying, like just like how we find in Vishnu Sahasranama, Devsu Chandraka Nakshatra Kamdhisho Bhurmaho Dadihi Vasudevasya Viryane Vidhitani Mahatmanaha. Sahasranama says that the firmament, earth, sun, moon, etc., etc., the stars are all held by the virya of Vasudeva. Perhaps taking this as a cue, Udayanacharya, he says in his text why Ishvara exists, or why we should accept the concept of Ishvara with the same thing, saying that heavy objects, we find heavy objects do not fall down. Just like he refers to sun and moon and says they are all so big and heavy, if they are able to stay in the space, it is because of the power of Ishvara. Like this, he has argued. Now, interestingly, very recently I saw a video in the internet which says there is a growing tendency among modern scientists to believe in the presence of a higher principle which could be God. Because they say previously life was thought to be very, rather, the reasoning for life was very simple terms. Just like you need a solar system, you need sun, you need earth, like this, etc. But then they never thought that how the other 8 planets would be useful for the support of life in earth. Now it is becoming clear to them that why Jupiter is very important for the sustenance of life on earth. How, let us say, other planets play a role in supporting life on earth. So like this, they're able to find out many reasons which all lead to the point that there is a superpower within the system, or in whom the system is, which supports the existence of the universe. Like this, the argument goes, the video goes. Now, same way, why I said all these things is that the Paramatma or Ishvara or Brahman is understood vis-a-vis, in contrast with the world or through the world. So there is a world here. So who supports the world? There is life here. Who supports life? That entity or that tattva is Ishvara. Even the Brahma Sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha, that's how it begins. Athata Brahma Jignasa, Janmadhyasya Yataha. The same way, here also, the Karikavali author begins with the concept of creation, the Karanatva basically. If the Jagat is a Karya, then Brahman is Karana. Let me briefly explain the 2-3 Karanas. So with this background, we can easily go through the slides. Fixing a Karana is very difficult. Just like in Gita, how like Krishna says, Adhishthanam tata Karanam. Like this, he says 5 factors are there, tata karta, in any creation process. Adhisthana, karta, karana, daivam, and karta, karanam, vividhani. 1 second, let me forget the last one. अधिष्ठानं तथा कर्ता अधिष्ठानं तथा कर्ता करणं च पृथक् विविधाश्च पृथक् चेष्टा चैवं दैवं चैवात्र पंचमम्. So the he says Daiva is a Daivikam or a divine factor, divine element which is God. Therefore, the role, all these five are required to do any activity basically. So to fix Karanatva, ultimate Karanatva is very difficult. And so the schools of philosophy, they apply their own techniques to identify which are all the causes and which is the most important cause, etc. The school of Nyaya has to be mentioned here. The school of Nyaya, they believe in three karanas: Samavayi Karana, Asamavayi Karana, and Nimitta Karana. What changes, or from exactly from what the karya comes out, the karya evolves. That's called as Samavayi Karana. Like threads are there, cloth is there. So the cloth emerge from the threads. Therefore, threads are called as Samavayi Karana. Mud is there, pot is there. So the pot basically comes from the mud. So mud is called as Samavayi Karana for them. Then Asamavayi Karana, the assemblage basically. See, there are threads left to themselves. The threads would get scattered everywhere, and they cannot come together on their own. So basically, the coming together of the threads, the conjunction or samyoga is called as Asamavayi Karana. So the Karana, the Karanas, all the Karanas have to come together. The coming together is called as Asamavayi Karana. As I said before, the threads cannot come on their own, come together on their own. So there are some factors required which need to bring the threads together in a desired fashion. Coming together means not just bundling like this. Then we can only get a bundle, not a cloth. So we need some agents like the weaver and the shuttle, etc., which is able to bring together the threads in a desired way so that a cloth arises. This is Nimitta Karana. These are. So therefore, this is Samavayi Karana, Asamavayi Karana, Nimitta Karana. Samavayi Karana is from which the product arises. Asamavayi Karana is the coming together of the parts or of the cause elements, causatory elements. And Nimitta Karana is what brings the parts or the factors of production together. In contrast to this, Vedantins, what they say is that they believe in Upadana Karana and Nimitta Karana because Shruti says so. Upadana Karana means what changes. Nimitta Karana means what makes the change happen. So mud changes into pot. And what makes the mud change into pot? These are the two factors. But along with this, there is one more called as Sahakari Karana. Sahakari Karana means which aids the Nimitta Karana. Since Brahman is believed to be the single Karana for the entire Jagat, it is defined as Abhinna Nimittopadhana Karanam. That is, in some cases, we find the Nimitta Karana to be different from Upadhana Karana. Like, let us take the example of mud and pot. Mud is the Upadhana Karana, pot is the product basically, and the potter is the Nimitta Karana, and the water, etc., whatever is there. So here we find the difference between the Upadhana Karana, what changes, and Nimitta Karana, what makes the change happen. But there are also examples in the universe in which we find both the Upadhana Karana and Nimitta Karana to be the same. Urna Nabha. Urna Nabha is the name for spider. I just occasionally write some poetry in Sanskrit. I wrote one addressing Padmanabha, saying that I also worship Urna Nabha because Urna Nabha comes in support of proving the existence of Padmanabha. Because Urna Nabha is a spider, it creates its own world or its own the net. Basically, it brings out the material from itself, and it weaves. It does the weaving on its own. It's amazing. One should watch the internet as to how the spiders they weave their web. It's really amazing. In the same way, Brahman brings about the world from within itself on its own with nobody's help. The idea is not mine. Ideas in the it's already in the past, but just the poetry could be claimed as my own poetry in Sanskritam. But here the point is that so Brahman is both the Upadhana Karana and Nimitta Karana for creation. If there are some Sahakari Karana like Kala, like time factor, because Brahman is believed to be the Antaryami of everything else apart from itself. Therefore, by way of Antaryamitva, the Sahakari Karana is also Brahman. So there is no other factor which is not Brahman in the existence, in the creation, sustenance, and let us say dissolution of the world. Now, if you change Brahman, if you say Brahman is the Karana, Upadhana Karana, you can say Brahman is Nimitta Karana. There is no problem with that. That's why Dvaita school, what they say is that just like Nyaya school, the Dvaita school, what they say is that Brahman is Nimitta Karana only. The Prakriti is Upadhana Karana. Because if you take that line, then you cannot say dosha on Brahman that it changes. Since Brahman is not Upadhana Karana, it does not change. But Nimitta Karana, because of Sankalpa. Naiyayikas also what they say is that it is the Paramanus which is Upadhana Karana or Samavayi Karana, and the coming together Asamvayi Karana, and the Brahman becomes a factor to make them all come together. So he is only Nimitta Karana. Advaitins what they say is that they believe in the Upadhana Nimitta concept, but they say it's only Vivarta. Vivarta means only manifestation. No, they don't believe in Parinamavada. But Vishishtadvaitins have a problem here. If you believe in Parinamavada means there is a certain Prakriti which changes to gross Prakriti. And if you say Brahman to be the Upadhana Karana, then it amounts to saying that Brahman changes. Now, that is the essence of the first Karika. The Brahman is believed to be the Upadhana Karana through the Prakriti, not independently. In Vishishtadvaita, Brahman is the Atma, and the Jivatmas and the Prakriti are considered to be its Sharira. Sharira is not in the same way as we think about having legs and a torso, etc. Sharira has three factors essentially. One is being Adheya, one is being Niyamya, other one is being Shesha. That is being supported, being commanded, being a subordinate. So these three things are found to be in the Jivatmas and Prakriti in vis-a-vis in relation to Brahman. Therefore, Brahman is believed to be the Atma, the Antaryami for these two. Now, in this way, Brahman, which is Vishishta, and such a Brahman is never alone. Rather, the other two entities, tattvas, are never alone. They cannot, even for the least amount of time, can never be without Brahman. So, these three are together always. Such a qualified Brahman is the Upadhana Karana, not the Brahma Swarupa. Therefore, the change, if at all we admit, it is through Prakriti. Prakriti only changes because of Shakti of Bhagavan. But since Prakriti cannot exist by itself per se, and it cannot change by itself, it can never be without Brahman. Therefore, Brahman along with Prakriti and the Jivatmas is believed to be the Upadana Karana. And now this is how it is being reconciled. For some of you, it could be too much to hear all this at one go, but it is good to listen again and again to these concepts. Then only things will be clear, because again this is only a primer, and more than that, philosophy is not which can be explained in one class or one session. We have to read many texts. So this idea in behind giving this lecture is to just to create an interest or a basic concept about what Vishishtadvaita is. It is left to the viewers and listeners to go back and read many texts basically. So let us go through the Karika now. Svetarakila Sheshitvam Ishvarasya tu Lakshanam. What is the Lakshana of Ishvara? Sva Itara Akila Sheshitvam. Sheshi is the master. Sheshitvam means the quality of being a master. Sva itara akila. So whatever is there apart from itself, the Ishvara is the master of everything else. That's the Lakshana given to one of the Lakshanas according to the Karikavali author. So Sukshma Chidatil Mishro Vishwopadana Karanam. So such a Brahman which is mixed with Sukshma Chitta Nachit becomes the Upadana Karana for Vishwa. Upadana Karana is material cause. Ata Ishvara Nirupyate Sva Itara Iti. How Ishvara is being explained? Sva Itara. So स्वस्मात् इतराणि यानि अखिलानि वस्तूनि चेतना चेतनात्मकानि स्वस्मात् from it whatever is different the entire thing in the form of chetana achetana tesham sarvesham api vishaye seshitvam ishvarasya lakshanam. So being a seshin being a seshi to all the other entities apart from itself is the lakshana or definition for ishvara. Such a ishvarah vishwasya prapanchasya upadana karanam bhavati. That ishvara becomes the upadana karana for prapancha. ननु तर्हि घटोपादानस्य मृदैव सविकारत्वं प्रसज्येत इत्यत्राह सूक्ष्म इति. Then as we said before, if you say ghata comes out of mrit or mud, therefore mud is the upadhana karana of ghata, but then ghata rather mrit itself changes. There is a vikara in the mrit or mud. Would such a vikara have to be admitted in Brahman then? No. That's why he says sukshma chidachit mishraha Brahman. Brahmano Vishwopadhanatvam na Nishkrishta Swarupasya. So it is not the Swarupa of Brahman which changes into the world. Into Chidachit Vishishtasya Yevedi Tadatve Tasya Svavikaratvam Ishtameva. The Brahman is qualified with Chitta Nachit. In fact, Vishishtadvaita contains Advaita. Advaitam is Brahman, and that Brahman is always Vishishta. It is never alone. It is always mixed with Chitta Nachit. Therefore, Vishishta Advaita. So Vishishtasya eva iti tadatve. Therefore, the Upadhanatva belongs to the Vishishta Brahman, not to the Brahma Swarupa. Vikara Nisheda Parani Vachanani tu Visheshya Bhuta Brahma Vishekani iti bhavaha. Therefore, wherever we find such statements in the Shruti that the Brahman is without any Vikara, that refers to the actual Swarupa of the Vikara. In the same way, the Jivatma's bondage is also accounted as real, not an illusion, because whatever changes happens to the body does not affect the jiva swarupa basically. Of course it does affect the swarbhava, but swarupataha is nitya. In the same way, Brahman here, even Brahman's swabhava is also not affected here, but only the visheshanas, the jivas and the jagat, they undergo change. But just like how the changes that happen in the body do not affect the atma swarupa, in the same way, the changes that happen to the Jivatma Swabhava do not affect the Brahma Swarupa. Therefore, there is no harm in admitting the Vishita Brahman as the Upadhana Karana for the Jagat. Ayam atra ashayah. Avastantara yogitvam upadhanatvam. We already saw this before. Upadhanatvam means avastantara yogitvam. The ability to be in different states. That is what is called as upadhanatvam. Avastha yogitvam cha sakshat parampara sadharanam. Now this avastha yogitvam could be sakshat, could be direct or indirect via another parampara also. Vradadehe sakshat avastantara yogaha. So mrit etc. they undergo or they transform into another state directly. Brahmanastu swaprakara bhuta chetana dvara. But Brahman being present in mud as well as in pot, now the change is not direct, not immediate, but through via media through the mud, etc. I mean, in accordance with whatever we are talking about. Therefore, the being in another state is not physical or literal for Brahman. It is through the Chetana and Chetana. Sukshma Chetana Chetana Vishishtam Brahma Jagat Upadhanam. Therefore, Brahman which is Vishishta with the Sukshma Chetana and Chetana becomes the Upadhana Karana for Jagat. Tatra Acetanamsho Sakshat Avastantara Yogaha. That in that transformation, the Achetana elements they undergo Sakshat change. They themselves transform. Chetanamshetu say. It's not a say there. Chetanam shetu sa sankocha vikasa yogita okay diya jnana dwara yogita diya jnana dwara. Okay, that is through the Swabhava Jnana basically, or the Dharma Bhuta Jnana. So Chetana Amsha also undergoes change, transformation, but only through the Jnana, Dharma Bhuta Jnana, and not to the Swarupa Jnana. So the world, it is believed that it is a Parinamavada, rather the world transforms, but the Achetana Amsha of the world, they transform literally. The Chetana elements, they do not transform literally in the Swarupa. Whereas the Swabhava gets affected, but in the entire process, both the Swarupa and the Swabhava of Brahman does not change at all. That is to repeat, the Swarupa and the Swabhava of the Prakriti changes in the process of creation. Only the Swabhava of the Jivatmas changes in the process of creation. Neither the Swarupa nor Swabhava of Brahman or Paramatma changes in the process of creation. Therefore, there is no harm in accepting Brahman qualified with Chetana and Achetana as Upadana Karana. Checking the time, that's 9:56. Okay, this is again getting into the details with Advaita Vedanta, which we'll see in the next class. The Karikavali, the commentator, he wants to clarify that even in Advaita Vedanta, where they believe Maya to be reason for the Vivarta of Brahman, Brahman qualified with Maya, or rather the reason for change is believed to be Maya and not Brahman, or rather the combination, and not on the Brahman per se. So he says this is how other schools also have to contend with. So this will contend with, this will see next week session. Any questions you can ask me now. We have to continue with the first second half of the first Karika. Any questions you can ask me now. These kind of primers will give us only familiarity with the subject. Some of you might have done some courses like MA, MPhil, etc. So for some it could be reinforcement, for some it could be familiarity, and only when we study other philosophies can we appreciate one single philosophy. If we don't study other schools of thought, we will never be able to understand why such a school or rather one school of thought puts forward a proposition in such a manner. Why should they say like this? Because there will be reason to defend its thought from the other school. Therefore, to counter certain things, they might have evolved or proposed certain things like this in a particular way. So unless we study the basics of other schools, it will be difficult for us to appreciate why it is being said so. And it takes some time. Philosophy, we need a lot of patience and the willingness to learn more. Okay. Hello. Any questions? Hello. Okay then. Sarvam Shobhanam. Astu Dhanyavadaha. Oh, the question. Studying different schools of philosophy sometimes system sometimes causes confusion. Yes, but confusion will only give us clarity, because unless you are confused, the clarity attained is not real clarity. Yeah, this is a very how do we resolve them? See, beyond the point, conviction takes over. Philosophy is the beginning. Studying is beginning. Shravanam, Mananam is very important, and it takes several births actually. It does not all end with one janma as we believe. So it takes several. It's a journey basically. We need to have faith in the Paramatma, and we have to take this journey constantly, studying and uh, see. One thing is that you have to be open-minded, and we also have to believe or appreciate that the more we learn, our understanding changes. When we are challenged, or until we are challenged, we tend to remain very closed. This is this is what it is. So at some point, you will get a feeling that okay, to me this appears closer to truth, because I cannot say that, well, this is the most perfect philosophy. How can somebody say that? Uh, it's quite difficult. Perhaps acharyas can say, but at least we will get a conviction when we take a sincere study that okay, to me this seems to be more logical and more convincing. But that conviction, how can you get? It's a process. It's not an end. So beyond the point, it becomes, you identify yourself with the philosophy, and then you try to reconcile things in accordance with your conviction. So we need to study, digest, allow conviction to grow. Then some shaking will be there, some doubts will be there, clarify, then study, conviction, like this. It's a long journey. We also need the grace of Paramatma, and we never know when we will be able to resolve them or when we will get clarity, but nevertheless, we should keep trying. I mean, if you think on the lines of science, it is even more confusing. I mean, I usually say this. It was perhaps easier to teach philosophy 200 years back when people were still in agraharams and living in small towns where they had a local god. It could be their own Ishtadevata, where world was not very big for them. But today, if you want to take philosophy to the next generation, it's very challenging. It will be very challenging because their starting point is very different. In those days, people simply thought, sun came in a chariot and 7 horses and things. People believed in them. Nobody, not many people questioned. Rather, I wouldn't say nobody questioned. But today, kids when they are born 3 4 years, they know very well. My young son is saying what spaces, his space is where you find the sun and other planets and all. It's only 3.5 to 4 years. My goodness, I never even knew what it was when I went to, I mean, until I went to school. So how can you tell this fellow that this is what philosophy is? So science is going to be a really interesting factor, which is either going to propel or dissuade people from taking up a philosophy. But anyway, so it's a journey. As to answer your question shortly, it's a journey. Philosophy is not a part-time. Pursuing philosophy is not a part-time job. It should be a full-time job. So even daily experiences we have to relate to whatever philosophy we believe in, and then reconcile. Then suddenly you will find that one day you will find the conviction with the grace of Paramatma. It could be any philosophy. It could be Advaita, Dvaita, Vishiddha, whatever. But we'll have to wait until then patiently and keep trying our best. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for asking this question. If there are no questions, then let us end this session now. कवितार्किकसिंहाय कल्याणगुणशालिने श्रीमते वेंकटेशाय वेदान्तगुरवे नमः. We will see next week. धन्यवादः. नमः सर्वेभ्यः.